International Interns Day is a global day which aims to raise awareness about the importance of improving accessibility and labor conditions of internships. It is led by the European Youth Forum and Interns Go Pro, and it is supported by the European Commission. The day has been celebrated since 2015 and has been articulated in a number of public events in Brussels, Madrid, Paris, Budapest, and of course, Geneva. Today we celebrate this day emphasizing on youth empowerment through fair internships. And this is at the heart of what ILO Interboard stands for. We stand for fairness, solidarity, and diversity. So in the first part of the event, we will have the opportunity to explore the main trends and the most recent data on internships, their conditions, and employment outcomes, as well as the legal framework where internships are embedded. At the second part, we will have a chance to follow a discussion about various internship programs within UN organizations and NGOs based in Geneva. Some days ago, Mr. Director General, we had the chance in an inside dialogue to talk about the responsibility of ILO towards its interns, and we touched upon the sensitive issue of unpaid internships. Once again, we're showing your support by being here with us today towards interns, and we warmly thank you. The floor is yours for the introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the ILO. We're extremely pleased at the ILO to be able to host this important event to mark, and I think we're a little early this year, to mark International Interns Day for this year. I'm very pleased to be here because I think that the subject matter that you're going to be talking about today is of importance for two reasons to my organisation. One is that because of our mandate in the world of work, we know that we have to focus more and more on the situation of young people entering the labour market. We know that the transition process from education into the labour market is an increasingly problematic one, and internships have appeared as a major factor in that transition process. I'm not going to bore you with ancient history, but when I was entering the labour market, I don't think I've ever heard of an internship. I mean, it didn't exist. Not only that I didn't have any access to an internship, it never occurred to me. I don't even know if they existed. I don't even know if the word existed. But now it's a big part of the realities of today's labour market. So it's important for us in the discharge of our overall mandate on the world of work. And secondly, these issues are important because the ILO is itself an employer, and we run internships at our own organisation, and I regard it as only a logical consequence of our mandate, but also the normal responsibilities of a good employer to take very seriously our own internship programs, and I'll come to that in a moment. One fundamentally important part of addressing these problems is to interact with interns and their representatives themselves, and that's why this event is extremely important, and I'm very pleased to be able to spend some time with you. Because, Katerina, we try to find ways to interact between you and your colleagues and ILO management, and we think that's a very productive and very important part of the story. Here are just two or three general thoughts about the issues you'll be discussing today. And I speak here from an ILO perspective. The first thing is, and this is sincerely and seriously meant, interns contribute tremendously to the work of our organisation. Offering an intern programme is not an act of charity, it's not an act of altruism, it's in the interest of the organisation, and I've placed on record on several occasions, and I do so again today, my clear understanding that interns contribute enormously to the work of our organisation, and I would venture to suggest that is the case with the other organisations of the international system. It therefore follows that we have, as management, as employers, strong responsibilities towards our interns. And those responsibilities, I think, have several facets. The first facet, I think, is to ensure that the conditions under which interns work at the ILO are satisfactory, and that of course brings us in the first place to the question of compensation. You're probably aware, and we're not alone in this, that the ILO offers not a wage, not a salary, but a stipend to our interns, and we've done our best to set that stipend at a reasonable and fair level. It's always going to be an issue of discussion. But that's the first point of responsibility. The second point is, I hope that the reason people come as interns to the ILO is not simply to put an entry into a curriculum vitae. 6 months at the ILO may look good. That's not good enough. Not good enough on the part of the intern, not good enough on the part of the ILO. We have a responsibility to ensure that the time spent by interns in our organisation represents concretely and genuinely the process of career development. That our management accompanies our interns, that the work that you undertake is meaningful and valuable and contributes to the professional development of the people in question. So there is a managerial duty. There needs to be a real training or development content to an internship. It's not just passing time in an office. It's fundamentally important. A third responsibility, and I'm going to be very honest with you, we struggle with this, is about fair access and equitable access to internships. It's unfortunate, but there is a very high geographical concentration of our interns. I think over 40% come from Europe. There is not an equitable geographical distribution. And that leads into one of the major problems or challenges that we all face in respect of internship policy. That is the issue of equity and social mobility. You probably know the ILO is approaching its centenary. We're looking at the future of work, and we're looking at a lot of what has been said about the future of work around the world. And I was reading one national report from my own country, coincidentally, talking about modern labour practices, and there's a whole section on internship programs. And it's a very strong recommendation. This is a national committee on working practices. It says very clearly that unpaid internships are exploitative and should be abolished, quite simply. Unpaid internships are exploitative and should be abolished, and they're unfair and exploitative because in most cases people undertaking internships should have the status of a worker and be entitled to all of the benefits that go with that. That's one reason. The second reason why they believe that internships, unpaid internships, should be abolished is because they represent a major obstacle to social mobility. Just think of it in this way. If access to internships is unequal, if undertaking internships is a major factor in access to decent work in the future, you can see how internships, unwitting consequences, unintended consequences, can be a locomotive of greater social inequality. And that goes against our mandate, it goes against what's fair in the world of work. So you see, the issues you're dealing with are of importance because intern programs are becoming much more widespread in the world of work. They're important because despite the very good things that come from well-run internship programs, there is a downside. There is a downside that we have to examine and that we have to address in ways that can take us forward. It's simply not good enough for an employer to, out of goodwill, say, okay, we can take people in if they want to come along. After all, it's voluntary, nobody's forced to come to the ILO. We'll give you an office, we'll give you a seat, we'll be nice to you, spend 6 months with us and then bye-bye. And that is a very easy attitude for management to fall into when it comes to internships. At the ILO we will not do that. We look forward as well not only to working with the representatives of our interns, but also with our sister organisations in the international system, to ensure that good practices prevail, that those good practices are made progressively better, and those elements which I frankly regard as unacceptable, I don't say they're intended, but they are unacceptable, are addressed and dealt with and eliminated. And I hope that in the types of conversations that you're going to have today, as well as in our ongoing interaction with our own interns through their representatives at the ILO, we can take that agenda forward. So thanks for being here. I look forward to the feedback from your discussions today. I'm very sorry, our governing body is meeting in this building at the moment. I've got some difficult problems waiting for me in other rooms. I would like to stay much longer with you. It would probably be a more positive experience from many points of view, but I'm going to be called to other things. So thank you, Katerina.
Thank you very much for that. We will now open the floor to some questions you may have for our Director General.
My name is Wendy. I come from Canada and I'm doing my internship here in the ILO with the Norms Department. I would like to know, according to Mr. Ryder, what advice would you give to young professionals who face current youth employment challenges? And also, what advice would you give to those engaged in internships programs currently and who would like to pursue a career in the UN system? Thank you.
Let me try that. Can I try that one? You know, I often get asked that question. I never know what to say. I'm not sure that my advice is very, very good. So let me just try to, you know, offer some thoughts. I think if I can say what advice to interns, don't think that your employer is doing you a favour by having you in their organisation. I mean, don't believe and don't accept, if I might say so, that you're there on tolerance and you've got nothing to say and no reason to speak up about your concerns, about things you want to be done better. So it's sort of urging you to activism in that regard, to make your voices heard in the organisation. Now, we've done our best. I'm not trying to claim perfection in the ILO, but we've done our best to make available to our interns avenues and mechanisms so that your voice is heard. I'd urge you to use those mechanisms. That doesn't mean, you know, to have an unreasonably negative or look for problems, but let us know. Because the only way we're going to really get to the target of making our intern programs better than they are at the moment is to work with you and to listen to what your problems are, what your insights are. So speak up, if I can put it like that. You know, with young professionals wanting to come to the UN system, look, there isn't anything very easy I can say about that. I never intended to come to the UN. I mean, I ended up here by accident. It was never an ambition that I had. It was never something that occurred to me. So, you know, I don't want to discourage anybody. I think working in the UN system is a great prospect, and it's a great career, and it offers a great deal. But it's not the only thing in life. And I think very frequently, I know it from my own family experience, young people have to look wide. I mean, you really have to look wide at what options are available to you. You're absolutely entitled to disagree with me. I wouldn't fixate on any one career path because the dangers of being disappointed or the dangers of exploring too narrowly your options, I think exist. You might take that as a word of discouragement. It's not meant as a word of discouragement. I think it's just something I can offer in the light of my own experience.
Hello. Thank you for coming and for your welcoming speech. My name is Irini. I'm half Spanish, half Greek, and I'm also interning in the ILO. And as you mentioned social mobility, I would just like to ask, how do you envisage internships in the future so that they can promote social mobility better in the context of what you mentioned in your speech? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marina. I'm from the US and I'm an intern I'm a consultant. I was an intern last year at WHO. My there's so much demand for internships within the UN system and elsewhere. What is it going to take for employers to change their practices regarding compensation beyond just the principle of it?
Good morning, my name is Jordan. I'm a student at the Credit Institute, and my question is possibly a bit related to the last one, and it's whether the ILO is currently actively lobbying the UN system to pay its interns, and if yes, how? Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Paul. I also work for the norms department. According to you, how can the decent work agenda better be mainstreamed both within and outside of the UN system concerning internships and future youth employment? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, hello, my name is Sanghu, and I'm currently an intern at UNAIDS. And my question is, with funding shortages faced by many of the agencies and organizations, what do you think the outlook is from ever transitioning to unpaid to paid internships given these shortages and difficulties faced? Thank you.
Okay, let me try to answer those questions. There's a lot of interconnection between the questions, so I'm not just going to go one at a time. I'll try and synthesize a bit. Look, this social mobility question, I think there are two problems. Why are internships potentially problematic in terms of social mobility? Bearing in mind that social mobility in most of our societies is going down in a dramatic way. You know, the best predictor of where you end up in life, where you end up in the world of work, is where you started and where your parents are. I mean, that is the injustice of social. It's not about talent, it's about privilege, effectively. So what are the two problems? The first problem, of course, is given that internships do not have a full salary, the type of salary that is normally connected to a normal employment relationship, you have to have some money behind you to be able to afford to do an internship. And secondly, how do people get internships in general? I'm not talking about the UN. How do people get internships? Who they know, contacts, family, social contacts, maybe through universities. But it is a relatively exclusive interface. We wish it were otherwise, but those are the realities. So your question is, how do we address those two things? Now, the one, and it relates to the latter questions about funding and resources, I don't have a good answer to that right now. I really don't have a good answer to that. We can try to increase our diversity criteria. We can improve the geographic, I think, representativeness of our interns. That's pretty doable. I can see ways to do that. I'm not sure how you overcome that basic income resource selectivity which is there, except by trying to move up the stipend to a degree that would not place such a heavy resource burden on the intern themselves or their families. That's how it goes. Funding, well, the ILO is in a zero real growth funding situation, have been for as long as I can remember. We're not getting more money. In fact, employees will get less money given the politics of the world. So there'll be no great future of massive abundance of resources. That's not on the cards. So we have to make decisions about what we do with our static real resources. We can perhaps invest a bit more in intern programs, but believe me, when I go back to my governing body in an hour's time, there's demands to spend our money on all sorts of things. And my political masters probably don't put internships at the top of their list, I'm afraid. That's the truth. So the funding question, we can always try to do more. We have tried to do more. But it would be wrong of me to say that there is a magic silver bullet solution out there in terms of throwing more money at the problem. But if you don't throw a significant minimum necessary amount at the problem, frankly, we shouldn't do internships. We need to put our money where our mouth is in terms of basic principles. I don't believe, although I accept the premise that the supply and demand balance in internships is great. There is greater demand than supply. It's a whole ethos of the ILO that we do not let labour markets determine terms and conditions of employment purely on the basis of market forces. One of our great sort of founding principles is labour is not a commodity. We intervene in labour markets with collective agreements, with laws, with regulations to ensure at least a minimum of fairness and equity in labour markets. So whilst I understand the point you make, and I think it's an entirely valid one about supply and demand on the labour market does not have the last words in terms of the terms and conditions that we offer, and that reverts to my initial point about what it is to be a responsible employer. It's probably true that we could offer unpaid internships in this organisation and fill the building with unpaid interns. We're not going to do it. That would be to cede to supply and demand in a way which would be entirely at variance with our principles. It's something we wouldn't do. Do we actively lobby the rest of the UN system? Look, this is a slightly ambiguous answer I'm going to give you. I run the ILO, or I'm responsible with others for running the ILO. I am directly responsible for the terms and conditions that we offer in the International Labour Organization. We also take part in the different institutions and discussions in the common system with our sister organizations around the UN, and had some very interesting examples of how we do that in the last few days. And we will advocate for, we will, in that sense, lobby for what we believe to be good and decent labour practices. But I don't dictate, it's not my job, I can't, even if I wanted to, dictate the rules or the policies that prevail throughout the UN system. But I do hope that the ILO is a voice and an actor which helps to move things in the right direction. And the last question was a much broader question about, well, how can we advance a decent work agenda inside the UN and out? My answer to that, it's what we do every day, every minute of our work in all of our member states. One thing which is really very encouraging to me is that in international policy making, the notion that employment is a key and that employment is fundamental to decent life and to stable societies is gaining ground very, very quickly. You might say that is a result of conditions in labour markets having become very difficult. Look at the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Decent work for all is right there in the middle of it, explicitly as a target. You look around the world. I was reading, you might find this a surprising reference, but the President Xi of China, his report to the 19th Communist Party Congress. Employment is a key to human well-being. We base our policies on full employment, social justice and fairness. These messages are getting through. I actually think that, excuse me if I can say this, your generation is giving policymakers that message very, very strongly. And I think that you must continue to do so, because by doing that, you will help to empower the ILO to make the difference that we can make in regard to this imperative of decent work.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Director General, and thank you, Ms. Susan de Patterson, for being here with us. This concludes the first part. Thank you.
Okay, good luck. Bye-bye.
We'll move on with the first part of our panel discussion with some keynote presentation on the current internship panorama. So we have with us today Mr. Luis Pinedo and Mr. Neil O'Higgins from the ILO Employment and Training Department. We have with us Ms. Laura Ciccarelli, representing the Fair Internship Initiative, and Mr. Gianluca Burci, Professor of International Law at the Graduate Institute. Thank you for being here.
anyone has any questions, please leave it in the comments, and we'll do our best to get it heard.
So, okay, so, or would you want me to sit that
So we will have first a presentation from the ILO Employment and Training Department. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name's Neil O'Higgins, and sitting beside me is Luis Pinedo, and we've been doing some work on internship and the effectiveness of internship in the international system, but also more generally. Can we have the first one? As I think everybody in this room knows, internships are increasingly becoming an integral part of the school-to-work transition. But actually not that much is known, and particularly there's not much systematic research on the extent to which, and the conditions under which internships provide an effective bridge to stable employment, particularly in terms of identifying causal impacts of internship on what happens after the internship in terms of labour market outcomes. What we did was what we have been doing, and continue to do actually, is review the existing evidence, but also analyse new survey data, seeking to identify some of the elements of internship which promote their usefulness, and in particular shed some light on the issue of paid versus unpaid internships. And I guess the bottom line, if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, the key point to be made here is that it's absolutely clear that paid internships produce better post-internship outcomes than unpaid internships. Absolutely clear. So not only is it an issue of fairness, it's more efficient to pay internships. Paid internships produce better outcomes. Can we go ahead? There's no internationally agreed definition of what an internship actually is. Basically, it's generally considered to be a period of work experience of between 1 month and 1 year, but which is not a regular employment relationship nor a formal apprenticeship. There are 3 types that you find. One is typically linked to academic study, a second internship to be part of active labour market programs. The third is so-called open market internships, and these are the most problematic and the least researched areas, where internships are in private companies or outside, let's say, a formal structure of educational or active labour market programs. Please go ahead. There are very few studies which actually identify the causal impact. The basic thing, I won't go through these in detail, but basically there have been some studies of academic internships and of active labour market programs, and the findings are internships produce typically produce a small positive benefits, and that these benefits are improved when the internships are paid. But let's go ahead. So internships more often than not associated with improvement of post-program employment prospects. Paid internships are associated with better post-program outcomes, but the identification of causal impacts, actually, is it the internship that is causing this improvement, is relatively lacking, and there's not much evidence on these so-called open market internships, these internships which operate outside the formal structure of education or active labour market programs. We analysed 2 surveys. One is the Fair Internship Initiative's own survey of international interns, and we also look at the Eurobarometer survey of trainees. This is, as I mentioned, there's no clear definition of what internships are. And in fact, the EU calls internship traineeships, and not even the terminology is anyway, there's a Eurobarometer of trainees in EU countries. These are both surveys of interns, so there's no basis of estimating the impact of internship versus no internship, but there's some basis for looking at what happens to paid versus unpaid internships. And we try to then look at why paid internships are a bit better, please. We can go straight on to the next. Okay, so I won't, no, please, just straight on, straight. I won't spend any time on the actual table, but the main finding is that from the Fair Internship Initiative is down the bottom there. The main point is the effect of being paid is positive on an interim outcome, that is hours worked, and it's highly statistically significant, but we don't find that there's any great improvement according to the amount being paid. So the fact of being paid is important, but the amount that is paid is much less important. Okay. As regards to the Eurobarometer survey, how many minutes? I'm trying to. We looked at, there are 4 outcome indicators, basically subjective ones from the respondents who replied whether they found whether they learned useful things during the internship, that the internship was useful to later finding a regular job, and then more factual questions of whether the company offered the intern a job after the traineeship and or whether the company offered to extend the internship. So we took these 4 indicators and we looked at what the effect of different characteristics of internship was on the outcomes. Please go ahead. There's the full table, but I'm not going to go through that, so we go straight on. Okay, so here we're trying to represent the main findings. What we have here are the 4 outcomes grouped side by side, and on the left-hand side, the yellow bar indicates the let's say base probability, the average likelihood of, for example, on the left-hand side, useful things being learned. So, for example, 63% of respondents said they learned useful things on the internship, and the little bits on the top are the marginal effects of the, in this case, being paid and being paid less than cost and being paid more than cost. So interns were asked whether they were paid less than sufficient to cover all their costs or more than sufficient to cover all their costs. They weren't actually asked how much they were paid, but this distinction was made. And what the outcome, the main outcome from this is that being paid is very clearly, and sorry, I forgot to mention, the statistical significance is indicated by the darkness of those little blocks at the top. So the darker blocks are strongly statistically significant. So the outcome that we find from here is that being paid is very clearly associated with getting a job offer with the company, and very strongly associated with an extension of the internship being offered, and it's also to some extent generally considered to be helpful in finding a job. There isn't much, and there is no statistically significant difference, there isn't much difference between being paid less or being paid more. So again, it's the same as with we find consistent findings that being paid more doesn't change much. It's the fact of being paid which is important. Okay, please go on. Internships need to last a bit of time for them to be useful. If you just look across this, as you move to the right, we're talking about increasing duration of internships, and really internship want to be at least 3 months, preferably 6 months or so, to really have an impact on post-program outcomes. There we go. And things like having mentorship, a written contract, and certification are also quite important. Okay, so we can go maybe to, actually, and a curious finding is actually being female actually reduces the chances of getting a job offer after an internship. And this we take as some indication of discrimination. And we found that interesting in itself, but it's a bit of a side issue. Go ahead. So just to conclude, paid internships associated with better outcomes. They're not just fairer, they produce better outcomes. They're more efficient. Being paid well increases only slightly the benefits. So it's not really about the amount you're paid, it's about the fact of being paid. Possible explanations are that basically you get better or more motivated interns, and that's certainly playing a role. But I think what's really going on here, this fact that being paid is important, but not the amount being paid. It's when firms pay. Firms which pay interns are more committed to making internships effective training programs. So I think it's really demand-side, firm-related factors that are key. Payment implies a whole series of institutionalization of the internship, which isn't actually necessary when it's just a casual arrangement, and that's supported also by the importance of certification and contract and so on. So that is our findings. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting to hear. Thank you very much. We'll have Laura Ticciarelli to represent the Interns Fair Initiative.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here today representing the Fair Internship Initiative, the instigator and organizer of this event. So the Fair Internship Initiative is a youth-led initiative founded in 2015 that advocates for accessible internships and fair working conditions for interns, and it has chapters in Geneva, New York, and Vienna. And obviously we are from the Geneva chapter. Our role is to serve as a focal point and platform for intern boards and associations in Geneva, so if they have an issue, they can come to us and we can link them to other intern boards who have similar issues, or we can help them through our networks globally. We organize events such as these and demonstrations for advocacy work, and we collect data on internship conditions at the global level through the Global Intern Survey that Neil mentioned, and that I am going to be presenting preliminary findings of this year's survey. So first of all, how did we get the data? So the questionnaire was prepared by a joint team consisting of ourselves and the various intern boards and associations, both in Geneva but also in our other chapters. And it was distributed mainly through social media, our intern boards and organizations, and newsletters. So the issues with our survey, as it does contain some flaws, is the statistical significance, as it is not non-randomized, so it's based on willingness to respond, so we broadcast it, but we only get the answers of who were willing to take the survey. And there's an uneven coverage of organizations and duty stations in the sense that there might be an overrepresentation of certain organizations depending on who was willing to answer. And yet, despite the flaws, this is the first and most comprehensive survey of its kind. So for 2017, we had 935 respondents from 89 organizations, of which 46 were UN organization and agencies in 64 different duty stations around the world. And of those who stated the organization, 90% were from the UN. And respondents were aged between 18 and 36 with an average age of 25. So as you can see, the majority of responses came from unpaid interns from the US and Switzerland, followed by France, Kenya, and Belgium, and a higher number of paid interns answered from France, Belgium, as these countries have internships are more regulated. So the vast majority of interns who responded, over 85%, were from countries of higher or upper middle income countries. And if we look at the country of study, where they did their studies, you can also see that the vast majority, over 90%, came from a higher upper middle income country, so studied also in a higher income country. So we often take the country of origin as an indication of socioeconomic background, but it's important to look at the country they studied in, as it gives more of an accurate indication of their actual socioeconomic background. So most internship experiences are considered a learning experience, but however, when the interns were asked if they perceived it more as a learning experience, mainly learning, mainly working, or working, 73% find that it's working or mainly working, and in any case, this is usually an argument to whether to pay or not pay. Seeing it as it's a learning experience, they usually say, well, if it's a learning experience, we shouldn't be paying. But aside from that, it's an accessibility issue. So beyond the fact whether it's a learning or working experience, what we want is to give access to everyone. So that's it. We also asked the question, could you have afforded your internship without family support? So you can see the difference between unpaid and paid interns. So the vast majority of unpaid interns obviously needed their family support. However, what's interesting is also to see that despite being paid, people still need the support of their families. So we also have to look at what we consider a paid internship, and what if the minimum is actually accurate according to the living standard of the city that you're doing your internship in. And so that's another important point to look at. And beyond that, what we ask also is, did it put your family in financial difficulty? So it's one thing to have your family support you, and if they're able to support you, great. But we wanted to see if it actually was putting their family in a more precarious situation. And unpaid interns, almost half of them put their families in financial difficulty. And again, paid interns, more than a quarter, put their families in financial difficulty. Also, one of the main arguments for not paying interns is that most of them get external funding from institutions, foundations, where our survey found that only 15% of interns are recipients of external funding. So very few actually do get funded and have to fund it themselves. So the percentage of interns who got a paid contract after the internship, so linking up to what Neil had mentioned after, those who were paid were 3 times more likely to get a paid contract after their internship. And our survey, those are a very small amount of the findings that we found. There were over 50 questions in the survey. This was just an overview. And we also asked questions where people could write their opinions and their thoughts, and these are some of the qualitative results. So I'm just going to read them out just for you to perceive what other people, the interns, perceive. So some said, many days I had to ration the food I ate because it was too expensive to eat 3 times a day, and I wanted to make sure my room was paid for so I wouldn't be homeless in Geneva. And although I have insurance, I've delayed seeing a doctor because I can't afford the on-the-day payments. I took out a loan. The internship has created conflicts with members of my family because of money. My mother's retirement fund was completely wiped out, so I could spend the summer interning at UN headquarters. I've lived and had to sustain myself on less than half the poverty line amount during the internship. I know many highly qualified people in my country for whom it would have not been an option, so meaning the internship. A family member was forced to sell an apartment, a vehicle, and furniture because of me and my desire to add the prestige of working at the UN to my resume, only to find out it was not worth it at all. I was one of the lucky ones to get an internship with ILO in Geneva. The stipend helped me a lot. It was only 1,800 francs, but it covered the living expenses plus my plane ticket. I didn't get family support because my family could not afford it, so I could only apply for the paid internship with the ILO. I come from a wealthy family. If I did not, I would not have been able to do the unpaid internship with UNHCR. I am privileged enough to be able to have my family pay for me to be here. It is a privileged person's internship, and it's not fair. So these are just preliminary findings of this year's survey. We will be publishing a report later on with the detailed analysis of the survey. Also, the next step for the Fair Internship Initiative is to continue the promotion, dissemination, and mainstreaming of fair internships both within and outside the UN system. We always have a demonstration in the month of February, so February 2018. We'll see you in Place des Nations. And we also will continue to support the intern boards and associations who need our help with issues that they have, and help them as much as we can. And just for your information, we hold our weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. at the Graduate Institute. So if you're willing to join us and want to learn more about us, please feel free to join us on Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lara. We will now have Mr. Gianluca Burce to tell us a bit more about the legal background of what we're discussing today. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. It's good to be here. I guess the reasons why I've been invited are two. First, because Irini was one of my students, so she more or less twisted my arm. And the second is because until last year, for many years, I was the legal counsel of WHO. So we had constant flow of interns, consumers of internships. But also, we also bumped into some of the questions that were discussed before. So, what I thought I would do is, as suggested by Irini, I guess many of you are not lawyers and not studied the United Nations. So you came here for an internship and you wonder, where am I? I mean, you know, the alphabet soup of the UN system, UNHCR, ILO, UNAIDS, WHO, UNHQ, UNFPA. So what is this institution where I am? What are the rules? How does it relate to the UN? There are many questions that are not necessarily self-intuitive. So I thought I would do two things in the 10 minutes that are assigned to me. First, give you some basics about the UN system and about what it means to work in the UN system. And second, give you some legal basics on internship. As the Director General said, and I think you have echoed, one of the problems is that there's no across-the-board definition and uniform rules on internship, so things vary. But by and large, there are some basics that I think you should know. So these are the two things that I will do. And I must say, I really listened with a lot of attention to what the Director General was saying. In particular, one fact, that certainly when I was a student, internships hardly existed. I'd never took an internship. I don't think any of my colleagues took an internship. We fast pedal to today, where you have a growing number of interns. I mean, I look in WHO in summer, interns dwarf the number of staff. So growing numbers, growing importance, it's seen as an access to labor market, it's seen almost as a form of work, not just as a student experience. So expectations and situations have changed dramatically, and I think this makes these kind of events and this kind of discussion even more urgent and more important. So Irini has projected that slide to give you an idea of the mess that the United Nations system is. But so basically I think there are two things to say. The first is that international organizations are artificial creatures, created by states, normally through a treaty, the Charter of the UN, Constitution of ILO, to perform international functions. They are not national agencies, they are international agencies. And states have created them to somehow guarantee their international status, their international nature. So that is done in a number of ways. The first is that these organizations, by and large, are not subject to the jurisdiction of any state. In some cases they are, but when it comes to their own working, to their own employment, to how they manage their own resources, to how they conclude the contracts and the agreements that they need to function, to exist, they cannot rely on national systems. They are totally autonomous and independent. That's why they developed their own legal system, and notably for employment. As a staff member of WHO, and before WHO of the United Nations, my contract was as an international civil servant, was exclusively with the organization, with my loyalty 100% to the organization. And my terms of employment were totally dictated by the rules of the organization, staff regulations, staff rules, and so on, in terms of salary, in terms of leave, in terms of discipline, in terms of possibility of termination of my contracts, in terms of career, and so on. So this is the first point. When you work in an international organization, you're really floating in midair. You don't belong to a national legal system. The second guarantee of the independence of the international nature of the organization is what we call the immunities of the organization. By and large, we cannot be sued, we cannot be taken to court without our consent, because otherwise any country would rush to make lawsuits, and that would carve into slices the international organization, the idea of an international civil service. So these are two of the big guarantees of, and also two of the big peculiar features of international organization that many people don't appreciate until they bump the nose into it, either because they work in one of them or because they have legal problems with some of them. So the UN system, as you see, it's a big, bit of a messy family, where you have the United Nations as such, but the United Nations has a number of what we call funds and programs. Some of you may be working, for example, in UNHCR, or UNDP, or UNICEF, or UNEP, or UNFPA, All these are not separate organizations. They're programs of the United Nations, created by the General Assembly, so by and large falling under United Nations rules, also with regard to internships, but with a remarkable level of autonomy, because they generate their own money, they have special programs, and so on. So when it comes to internships, sometimes they have slightly different rules from what you would have if you were interning in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is a department of the UN. It is not a funded program. So you can be neighbors, but have slightly different conditions and, in a way, a form of not of employment, but of your stay in that institution. Then you have the specialized agencies, ILO, WHO, WMO, ITU, WIPO, and so on. These are separate organizations. They are part of the UN system because we have like a common system of employment. My salary is the same whether I work in the UN or WIPO or ILO. But they're separate organizations with their own policies and their own rules, for example, when it comes to internships. So don't assume that because you're in ILO, you have totally the same conditions that you have in WIPO. There are some basics, but there are also differences. So that's important for you to know. So coming to, let me fast pedal, but coming to internship, I think there are some basics that apply across the board. The first basic is an internship is not a form of employment. You are not a staff member of the organization. And that's why there is a reluctance on the part of certain organizations to compensate in something that can be used as a salary, because a salary is a typical remuneration of employment, and you are not employees of the organization. Neither, by and large, are you contractors. You're not consultants. You don't have a consultancy contract. Internships are opportunities offered to students, by and large, to have an on-the-work experience for a certain number of months. As the Director General said, it's not charity. It's in the mutual interest of the intern, which first of all can see the system from inside, can gain valuable experience, can be more marketable for employment because it shows that he or she had an internship in an organization, but also beneficial for the organization. And so the interest in having high-skilled interns that stay for 2-3 months and can produce. They don't take 2 or 3 months to be trained, but they can really contribute and produce as fast as possible. So beyond these basics, as I said, different organizations have slightly different rules, but keep these basics in mind, because you will find a lot of pushback if you try to present yourself as like disguised employees of an organization. You are not. So what are the main legal issues? The first, and I think it's dominating your attention, is the question of financial support. And I also totally agree. I come from an organization, 2 organizations, UN and WHO, that give no financial support whatsoever to interns. And I find it grossly unfair. I find it totally distorting in terms of geographical representation and for all the other very valid reasons that were evoked before. We can discuss what are the reasons for and what can be done in a way to start the discussion in that sense. But the money is not the only issue. The other issues are, first, the lack of uniform policies. I think there's a need at the level of the UN system to have at least certain basic policies uniform. So you can expect similar conditions if you serve in different organizations. The third is a clear policy on what your assignments are. I mean, interns working in my former office in WHO, by and large, worked alongside us, did research that I would have liked to do, but I never had the time. And so in a way, they really engaged in very valuable research, but then they drafted papers. They came to meetings with us. They really tasted what it is to work in the legal office of a big organization. But in other cases, we saw interns more or less exploited, doing photocopies, and that's not the idea. So also this having some expectations and accountability on what you are assigned to is very important. The other is, and that's a very delicate issue, is access to justice. As staff member of organization, we have access to the administrative justice of our organization. For example, as WHO, I had access to the ILO tribunal here. But as interns, you don't. And even though for 2-3 months the chances of something going wrong are relatively low, they are not zero. And I've seen in the course of my career sometimes legitimate legal issues for interns. And then you don't have a clear standing in terms of what are your remedies. And finally, let's face it, as the Director General said very realistically, the challenges of the UN system is that the system in crisis, I think. The demands remain the same, the money continues to decrease. And so the organization use more and more alternatives to staff. They outsource functions, they move offices to cheaper locations, disrupting people's lives because they either move or they lose their employment. We outsource to companies, to contractors, to consultants, and frankly, we use interns as a form of almost disguised stuff. Interns do very substantial work, which is good for them, but it's not as it should be. You should be assigned to support us, to do research and so on, but not to take almost like responsibility of a staff member in representing the organization. But that's a reality for organizations. They need to do the same amount of things with less and less staff and less money. So also this is something you have to take into account in your conversation, your discussion, your advocacy. Take these realities into account. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
I believe we have time for 1 or 2 questions if you want to address to our speakers.
Thank you. Good morning. My question is for Niall. Thank you for the presentation. As you'd mentioned about how some of the causal mechanisms of how internships impact employment offers is still unclear. I was just curious if the ILO has any projects to conduct further detailed research to understand these causal mechanisms, and also possibly to understand how internships relate to broader shifts in the labor market and the labor economy, such as moves towards a gig economy and other forms of precarious work. Thank you.
Okay, just very quickly. This internship work is ongoing. I don't really want to go into too many details about what we're doing in that because it's a little uncertain. But we intend to continue with this internship work, trying to better identify causally the impact. I mean, so far we've made some progress, but we have an idea how to do that, but it remains uncertain. It's curious, this thing with the internship and gig economy. Actually, myself and Lewis have also been working on a paper on the gig economy and on crowd workers, in particular crowd workers survey. The two things are not directly connected, but certainly I think they are both indicative of the increasing, let's say, fragmentation of employment and the increasing, let's say, instability of entry point employment, particularly for young people. And I think that they're both indicative of that. But I mean, they're not directly related, also because internship is typically a kind of typically higher level professional level preparation, and gig economy is often lower skills. Varies, but it's lower. But so they're not directly related, and I don't think people go from being an intern to working in the gig economy necessarily. But I think that they're part of a more general phenomenon to, let's say, shortening of the long-term employment relationship, which is I think is a technologically driven process basically, and it's affecting all parts of it, particularly young people. Particularly new forms of employment.
Thank you to all our speakers for this discussion. Okay, we'll move on with the second part of our panel, which is a discussion where we will be able to hear more about different internship programs within international organizations and NGOs in Geneva. So we have here us today our own Ms. Sylvie Leus-Saltier from ILO.
We have Miss Svenja Price from WIPO, Miss Natalie Hen from UNICEF, Miss Diane Epstein, and Miss Fatima Peregrino Brima from IOM, and Miss Mona Mbouke from UPR Info. So our speakers represent organizations which are examples of good practices in promoting decent work and diversity throughout the UN system, but also we have a representative of an NGO in Geneva. And they will address a few questions that we believe are of interest to current and prospective interns, so it is going to be in the form of a discussion, if you agree. Okay. So the first question is for all of you, and we're wondering, what are the key elements that, according to you, make up an exemplary internship program? And in this context, can you talk a bit about the internship programs that you are offering? And also in relation to that, despite that we consider internship as a learning experience, your organization pays interns. So how important is it to pay your interns? I think you can start by...
Good morning. My name is Mona Mbouke. I'm the Executive Director of UPR Info. UPR Info is a non-profit organization, an NGO based in Geneva, and we have also an office in Nairobi. So we are part of an initiative, We Pay Our Interns. That's a group of around 40 NGOs, and there's a charter, and the organization that committed to this charter agreed to pay their interns and also to have a meaningful and effective internship. So for UPR Info, to respond to your question, what makes a good internship, I think is to have a good supervision of the internship, to have also in terms of duration, to have an internship of at least 4 to 6 months, to have lead tasks given to the interns. And we see the interns really as part of the staff of the organization. We give them responsibilities. We allow them to develop the skills, and they also bring all their energy, fresh input. They bring their knowledge that they have gained from the university or different experience that they gain. So we really value interns in our organization, and we believe that it's really important, especially as we work in the field of human rights, to pay the interns, and in that end also to comply and with a commitment to decent work and ensure that interns can be independent financially, and also to ensure that the diversity of and representation also from people who are not from wealthy family can also get an opportunity to work. And especially now, as we have heard before, the internship is often a necessary transition before entering the labor market. So we ensure by paying our interns that they are valued. We consider the staff, and we allow people from different backgrounds, and also depending on the social status to have this work experience also. Thank you.
Yes, good morning everybody. My name is Sylvie Layou-Saltienne. I'm in charge of the ILO internship program here at the ILO. So thank you for inviting us. It's really honored to be here today for this International Interns Day. So just to reply to your questions, at the ILO, we have to say we are quite proud of our ILO internship program. And at the ILO, the objectives of the internship program is to provide interns with the opportunity to gain practical learning experience in the organization dealing with the world of work issues. Why are we so keen in protecting our interns? As part of an ILO team, the interns are working directly with outstanding and inspiring supervisors. The interns contribute to analytical work on principles, programs, and strategies of the ILO. The interns participate in as well in meetings And most of them, like it's a good example of today, they are exposed to high-profile conferences like the GB or the ILC, which takes place in June. As you said as well, the ILO is a learning experience. It's not a working experience. It's from 3 to 6 months. And the ILO provides as well training opportunities to all the internship group. One of them is mandatory, and it's called the Disability and Equality Training. So every 2 months, we have this training organized only for the interns. It's 1 day, and it's not deducted from the annual leave day. It's part of the learning experience. And we offer as well like IT skills courses, communication courses, as well as plenty online free courses. Likewise, interns can have access to language trainings together with staff members. And all these trainings are like either only for interns, but some of them are really be part of the ILO staff members. And as Mr. Guy Ryder said, it's a good way as well for interns to network and to meet staff outside their own department. What I will proud as well of our internship program is the selection process. We only select now interns via our online roster. And that ensures transparency in recruitment to facilitate the pre-screenings of internship candidates and to demonstrate as well the ILO commitment to provide equal opportunities with women and men and even with interns with disabilities. In the last June roster, we received more than 3,000 candidatures, and we had like a 46 profiles. We do as well, it's encourage diversity. We have a lot of effort to do again in this area, but we try to encourage interns from non or underrepresented countries. I was last week in China just to promote as well the internship program, as well like other programs dedicated to young talents. So we try to participate and more in career fairs in this kind of countries just to attract more young talents to join the ILO. What we do as well just in the way of transparency, we have a written test and interviews, so it's like a real selection process, but in a very transparent way. And all the interns, they have a supervisor dedicated to them for the whole period of the internship. And the role of the supervisor is to guide the interns for the whole period, and just to make sure that the interns are part of the departments and of the team. We meet as well in HR quite on a regular basis with the supervisors and as well with the intern board, just to make sure that we can improve on a daily basis as well our program. And the last, we sign an internship agreement only with interns, not with universities. We don't want to give a preference to one university compared to the others. So when we go to the fair, we ask the interns to apply via the roster, and if they are selected, even they're paid by their universities, we ask them to enroll via the roster. If they pay less than what we offer as a stipend, and we'll come to this point again, then the ILO will pay the difference. So at the end of the month, all the interns are paid equal. And the last good point that we do as well at the ILO is the briefing sessions. All the interns arrived on the 1st or the 15th of each month. They all arrived as a group, and then we organize here like a briefing with all the new interns. The intern board is actively participating into this briefing. We go through like a PowerPoint presentation of all these administrative issues, and we give them a guided tour as well, and we make sure that the interns is really well integrated into the team. So we are really spoiled our interns, and even some of staff are jealous about the interns. We make sure to continue that way.
Thank you very much. My name is Fatima. I'm the intern coordinator in IOM. I'll introduce you to Ms. Diana Epstein, who is the head of talent management, who will begin by speaking on behalf of IOM. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As Fatima mentioned, my name is Diane Epstein, and I actually started at IOM as an intern 17 years ago in the UK. And I have developed my career within the organization. And I always tell interns, prospective interns, that the likelihood of getting a job, especially nowadays, is quite difficult within the organization after an internship, but it does happen. And I think IOM is a fantastic organization to work for, to do an internship. We really provide meaningful work. We're very much a decentralized organization, which is very different from many of the other UN agencies. So our headquarters here is actually quite small, whereas 97% of our staff are in the field. So we have, so Fatima and I are speaking on behalf of headquarters, but if interns want internships in the field, they can go directly to the chief submission or the office in the field. I think one of the things we do struggle with is the issue of diversity. I mean, I look around the room here, especially in our headquarters, and many of our interns are coming from North American, European universities, and it's something we're trying to promote within the organization. IOM recently launched a diversity and inclusion research, and we're making our managers more aware on how to attract more diverse interns, which really make up our organization in the field. We have an internship program, and I'm going to speak on behalf of our headquarters, where we try to create a welcoming environment where interns feel part of the organization. The DG actually addresses every intern on a quarterly basis, so we organize a group to make them feel appreciated, that their work is valued by the organization. Fatima is the focal point, so they always have someone to go to. Plus, they also work with their managers and their feedback forms, both on the side of the manager to find out about how the internship went with the intern, but also on the side of the intern. We like to receive feedback in order to improve our programming. So I'm just going to end there, and then I'm going to pass over to Fatima to speak a little bit more, and then we'll pass on to our next colleague.
Thank you. At IOM, we have paid internships, and then we have other internships which are funded by universities and other governments. It's part of the DG's mandate not to have voluntary work at IOM, so we strive not to have unpaid internships at IOM. According to us, to make an exemplary internship program, we need to have an effective communication between host organizations, interns, and universities on-campus career centers. We also prepare a very meaningful and effective terms of reference, which we share with interns before they come to IOM. We share these terms of reference with interns because we want them to ascertain that these are the tasks that they want to do when they come to IOM, and the tasks are sort of like in relation to their career development. We also try to, like Diane said, to attract and admit a diverse group of interns by focusing on gender, nationality, and other characteristics. We follow up on interns regularly. Now and then I speak to project managers to find out how interns are doing, and I also find out from interns how they progressing in their internships. When interns arrive at IOM, I personally organize intern briefings for them, where I speak to them about their careers and their relationship with their supervisors. I encourage them to always ask feedback from their supervisors on their performance. I also encourage them to network when they come into the organizations, because internship is basically trying to network with different people and also trying to ascertain whether whatever you're doing is in relation to your career development. I also try to speak to supervisors on how to coach and mentor the interns to ensure that they have a very meaningful internship, because most of our interns come out of the jurisdiction, and they spend a lot of money on travel before coming here. So I encourage them to make sure that they have a very fruitful internship. At IOM, we share the learning objectives with interns. The learning objectives are put together by the relevant supervisors and shared and reviewed by interns. IOM grants the interns the liberty to form a board, which engages in social activities and current interns in the office. We have two types of internships. The paid internships
the paid internships are given a form of stipend. The interns are also pre-funded by organizations and universities. Per our internship instruction, interns benefiting from an internship allowance or scholarship granted by their university or other sponsoring bodies that include financial remuneration will not be eligible for an MSA. The MSA is a monthly subsistence allowance. This monthly subsistence allowance is calculated as a coefficient of the DSA of Geneva. So this is good because the DSA changes with time. So the DSA is sort of like targeted with the living conditions of the country. So if living conditions are going higher, it will also affect the amount of stipend we give to the students. Internships are a mutually beneficial venture where the host organization gains support from the candidates assigned to specific tasks at a relatively low cost, and in return, the intern gets exposed to the working environment and learns new skills and works in a specific area. IOM accepts diverse interns at its headquarters and country offices worldwide. The work and operations of the IOM can be relatively unpredictable as there are peak and non-peak times during emergencies, which leads to supervisors needing some basic support towards achieving set tasks. IOM, being a highly projectized organization, is limited in funding and therefore have the need to engage a cost-effective means of involving temporary human resources to support and alleviate the works of supervisors during this peak period. That being said, in the summer, we have so many summer interns coming to IOM. These summer interns are interns from various universities who join the organization to have a practical, to work in a practical working environment, to sort of develop what they've been studying in school, in the university, sorry. These interns bring the knowledge they acquire from their university's experiences to their assigned tasks. Due to their high motivation and drive, most students, while on internship, tend to work very well in IOM. IOM, I would say a retention rate we get about a maximum of 60 interns per year, and the retention rate at the headquarters, not worldwide. The retention rate at the headquarters is like 10% of the 60 people who work within the organization. They are retained as consultants, they are retained, some get very short contracts, and some grow within the organization, just like Diane joining as an intern and being where she is today. We have staff members who have joined as interns who are today in directorship positions. We have interns who are in our field offices who have grown up as project managers. The little advice I would like to give is that when going for an internship, concentrate on the content of the terms of reference rather than any other thing. Thank you.
My turn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Nguyen. I'm an HR associate working with UNICEF here in Geneva. So thank you very much for being given the opportunity to speak to you today about our internship program. In terms of what makes a good internship program, I think there are many elements that goes into it, starting from sourcing of the interns. How do we reach the interns to make it known that there's an opportunity coming up within UNICEF? It also involves working closely with the hiring managers to support them in designing TORs that reflect the work that is meaningful for the intern. It's also working again closely with the hiring managers to make sure that onboarding takes place properly and that the interns have access to the orientation with UNICEF. Regular feedback being given to the interns throughout their internship with UNICEF, and it ends with the evaluation. In terms of also, I think that an internship is successful when it's a win-win scenario for both the intern and the organization. So for the intern being given the opportunity to enhance and also to complement their area of studies through meaningful assignments that are being given to them. And for UNICEF being given the opportunity to benefit from the work of the interns who oftentimes comes with new innovative ideas and also up-to-date education knowledge. So in terms of the program with UNICEF, I'm very happy to say that very recently we have introduced new guidelines to our internship program. The objective remains the same, being that we want to provide an opportunity for talented students to engage with UNICEF and to work with us. But we have expanded in making it more flexible, the criteria for selecting interns, to make it more inclusive and also to make it more transparent. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes just going over these 3 areas, main changes to our internship program. So first of all, we wanted to make it more flexible. And that means reaching as wide of an audience as possible. Since UNICEF works so closely with youth, it made sense to us to broaden the criteria for selecting interns. Whereas before, we were looking for students who were enrolled in a master's program or having completed 2 years of undergraduate studies. With the new guidelines that we have introduced now, we are considering interns as of the age of 18 who are enrolled in an undergraduate program, a graduate program, or even a PhD program. And we are also considering for internship students who have recently graduated within the past 2 years. So that has really broadened the perspective of interns that we can bring into our organization. The duration of the internship starts with 6 weeks. We think that that's the really minimum amount of time to give the interns participating with us content to the work, and the maximum duration is 6 months, full-time. We also consider part-time work equivalent to 6 months, so that could be for 1 year. For example, for students who are interning with us, but at the same time continuing with their studies. So to make it as flexible as possible. We wanted to make, second point, one of the changes is also to make it as inclusive as possible. And I think this is a theme that has come up quite a bit today in all of our discussions. And how do we make it more inclusive? I mean, I think that in terms of the financial constraint, this is one of the main points that has come up, that has some students who would be eligible, who would be very qualified, would not be able to access the internship program because of the financial constraint. So what we have decided to do is to make paid internships possible with UNICEF. And this, when we advertise, we make it very clear at the bottom of the advertisement whether it is a paid or unpaid internship, so that students who otherwise would not be able to benefit from an internship program could now access this. So it is like other organizations who are offering paid internships. It is through a stipend. It is not meant to cover the full expenses, especially if in Geneva it is we realize that it can be quite expensive, but to largely contribute already financially to the internship. So it is for the headquarters location of UNICEF. It is a stipend of $1,500 per month. And plus, we are able to also financially support a lump sum travel cost for the intern to come to the duty station. For our country, because we are also based in many country offices, for our country offices, it is the equivalent to 65% of a GS1 Step 1 salary. So again, the idea is to financially contribute and make it as accessible as possible to interns in order to reach as wide of an audience and make it more inclusive, so that we have representations as widely as possible in terms of internship. The third point is that we have made the internship program more transparent ever than before in terms of advertising for the internship program, just like one of, I think, ILO through our e-recruitment website. So all our internship vacancies are being advertised on our e-recruitment. This is, we have one e-recruitment system where you find vacancy announcements for fixed-term positions, short-term positions, consultancies, as well as internship. And this is where we interact and have dialogues regularly with hiring offices who are interested in hiring an intern, is to make this opportunity available so that they are able to select from as wide an audience and diverse an audience as possible. So these are, in a nutshell, the three steps that UNICEF has taken to make our program more flexible, more inclusive, and more transparent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Svenja Price. I'm an HR Planning Officer at the World Intellectual Property Organization. Thanks very much for having me this morning and giving me the possibility to speak about WIPO's internship program. In terms of the key elements of a good program, I think WIPO's internship program incorporates a lot of the elements that my colleagues have mentioned here as well. WIPO advertises the program on the website, so applications for internships can be made through the same recruitment system as interested candidates for staff positions would use, and also for consultancy opportunities. We publish a roster, so then we select interns from the roster, which is open for a specified period of time. WIPO limits the number of internships per program per year. So we say in terms of quality, so we can ensure that we have a supervisor that's got time to actually look at the work of the intern and put together meaningful terms of reference. We only allow programs to have one intern at a time. There are a couple of programs that are exempt from this, but generally that's the rule. And in our experience, that works well because we actually can be sure that the work that we have, the assignments, can be supervised in a certain way, because I agree with a lot of my colleagues that it's very important to have a good integration system, a good induction system, and that interns have somebody they can go to and who supervises their work. In terms of diversity and inclusion, I think we face similar issues to a lot of my colleagues. We integrate the internship program in the outreach efforts that we do for regular vacancies as well. We visit unrepresented countries, and we heavily promote the internship program that we have, and we also have fellowship programs that we talk about. WIPO doesn't offer any unpaid internships, so the internships that we do offer are paid. We have two different categories of internships. We have a category 1 internship, how we call it, which is for students who have either completed a first-level university degree, so typically a bachelor's degree, or are enrolled in postgraduate studies and have basically not completed their coursework yet, so it's early stages of the program. For those internships, we say typically the duration is 3 months, and we say 3 months because we feel this is the minimum duration to be able to get familiar with a certain program within WIPO and contribute meaningfully to the work that the program does. And it's possible to prolong these internships up to a maximum of 6 months. And we pay 500 francs for these internships. We have a category 2 internship, which is for students who have completed their master's degree or have completed their coursework and are currently busy with their thesis. It's a longer internship program, so we say minimum duration for those students is 6 months, with the possibility to extend for up to a year, and we offer 2,000 francs as a stipend for these interns. As with many of my colleagues, what we offer is not a salary, it's a stipend designed to contribute to the living expenses in Geneva, and of course we know that especially 500 francs does not go an awfully long way towards the expenses, but it's some contribution. In terms of what we do to maintain the quality of the program, is that we are in close contact with the programs who want to offer internships to make sure that they have meaningful terms of references in place. We occasionally have managers approach us to say, I've just lost a secretary and I have so much work, couldn't I maybe recruit an intern? So to that we must say no, because interns are professionals, coming into the workplace with a certain body of knowledge. It's not to replace a regular staff member, but of course attempts are being made, because just as with other agencies, resources are tight and we don't have new positions that we can create to pick up some of the work. So people do try, but we try through regular dialogue with managers to outline what an internship program is and what interns are there to do. We collect feedback at the end of the internship, which we review and try to incorporate in possible further iterations of the program. We don't have a good way of systematically doing it at the moment, so we're looking into ways of making that better. We were also thinking of maybe putting in place a mentor for interns. Of course, there is a supervisor, but we don't have as such mentors in the organization who take on interns from different areas. So that's maybe something that could be interesting for the future. There's also structurally a performance evaluation at the end of every internship, so we give feedback to interns ultimately when they leave, but we encourage regular feedback while the internship is still ongoing as well. Internships at WIPO are typically at headquarters in Geneva. We're very headquarters based. We have about 1,300 people in Geneva, and we have a few satellite offices around the world, in Brazil, in Singapore, in Tokyo, in Russia, and China at the moment, and 2 more in Africa in the next few months. We select interns to those offices too, but they're extremely small. They're staffed by 2 to 4 people typically, so most of the interns that come and work for us would come to Geneva to work at headquarters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that all of you mentioned that an internship aims to provide meaningful tasks and also appropriate supervision and adequate social and labor rights during the internship, but also basic financial support. So another question is, how does one ensure that these are truly provided beyond their mention in the internship agreement? If one of you would like to address this question.
I believe that to ensure really the internship is meaningful, as we said before, it's good to have the term of reference, it's true, but I think the supervision is key to ensure that the interns can develop their skills, can learn, and that to have regular feedback, regular dialogue, I think, between the interns and the supervisor. I think ensure that on both sides, the interns benefit from this learning and work experience, and on our side, yes, we ensure that it's also a commitment that, yes, it's a win-win process.
Thank you. I fully agree with my colleague at the ILO. As I said before, we have a supervisor who is fully dedicated to the interns, and when they do the interview, they make sure as well that the interns really match the needs of the ILO, and the ILO as well could really be meaningful to the interns. So what they do as well, they make sure that the interns feels comfortable, home in a way, in terms of the task. If there is too much or too low task, their job is really to adjust the action plan that was defined together with the intern. As well, apart from the supervisor, we have the pleasure as well and the honor as well at the ILO to have an internship team. We're only 2, but we try without the support of the interns and the intern pools, we will never had such a success program. So I would like to thank, first of all, special thanks to the intern board as well and to the team. And apart from the team, we have as well the social advisor,
who is present as well with the interns if case there is any issue with the landlord or with any other personal issues. The social advisor is always available for the interns, and the staff union. The interns can be part of the staff union. And we have as well, as I said, the very interactive intern board, just to make sure that the interns feels home and feels comfortable within the team and with the ILO. As I said, as we said, it's a win-win situation for all.
In addition to what was already said, IOM has guidelines for internships. So this governs our offices globally. So to ensure a fair and transparent process in terms of stipends, in terms of supervision, in terms of other aspects that make a meaningful experience for the internship.
Well, I'm not going to be so original. I think I'm going to repeat a lot because we have very similar practices with UNICEF. But from my own experience, I think that the dialogue that we have with managing supervisors when they approach us to let us know that they are looking for an internship, to work closely with them in the design of the TOR. But sometimes the TOR is designed by them, and then having an additional eye from HR to ensure that what they're asking for is going to be meaningful and value added for the intern. I think that's very important. And although internships are quite decentralized in UNICEF, we do have a section in headquarters in New York that is dedicated to providing advice to supervisors who are interested in taking on interns. So it's really, I think, to manage the expectations of the managers from the very beginning as to what it is expected from an internship, and that the TOR that they have designed really follows through for the intern. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I've got many more things to add. But obviously, close cooperation and good communication with managers is absolute key. What my colleague from UNICEF said about managing expectations is very important, especially in the beginning of the process, because sometimes we get requests from managers to recruit an intern to start a week later. Of course, that is not possible. The administration and the paperwork has to be in place, especially if interns come from a country where there is a visa necessary to enter Switzerland. So I think it's to have a constant dialogue to talk about what's possible and what's not is important. What I also wanted to say, and this relates to maybe a question we'll pick up on a little bit later as well, is that we try and encourage our managers to give out the message that there's no automatic employment by WIPO after the end of the internship. Obviously, all interns can apply for fixed-term posts that we have. There's no restriction. But for temporary opportunities, be it a temporary employment contract or a consultancy or anything else, a non-staff contract, we have a 2-month, what we call cooling-off periods. So interns would have to leave the organization and can only take up employment or a consultancy 2 months after the end of the internship. And we put this in place as a response to situations we've had where an internship was seen as preparation for longer-term employment and backdoor recruitment, which we want to avoid in the interest of giving the same opportunities to everybody to be considered for positions. So we try and encourage managers to say, this is a learning opportunity for the people that work with you. This is for you an extra pair of hands to get assignments done that, just as the colleague from the university said, you've never had time to do yourself. But it's not an opportunity for you to recruit a staff member that will stay with you for longer term. Of course, it's for WIPO to also spot talent, but it needs to be done in compliance with the processes that we have in place in any case. And it's all about teaching skills that people can use in a variety of different workplaces later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the last question is related to what you just mentioned, and it is, so what do you think that is the greatest contribution of interns to the work of your organizations? But also inversely, what is the contribution of the organization to the intern, both short and long term? And in this context, how can an exemplary internship as the ones that you're presenting today can contribute positively to an intern's employment prospects after the internship?
Thank you. I think the greatest contribution of interns to the organization, I see it as they bring fresh ideas, up-to-date knowledge. They come from the university, they bring new ideas. And yeah, it's a great contribution to the organization. On our side, what we can offer, it's offer, as they enter in the labor market, is for them to develop their skills, to be able to develop the skills, to learn new knowledge, and also to learn what is it to be in a working environment, to have clear expectation. I think, yeah, that is what we could contribute to. The last part of your question was...
And it's related to that, it's to the future employment prospects.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then in terms of employment prospects, because they have been learning what is it working in an organization and develop new skills, I think it definitely contribute for them to facilitate their entrance into the labor market. And if we hear about any labor job opportunity, we also assist them. We ensure that we give them a good reference if they need. So this is how also we help them entering into the labor market. And I like the idea of mentoring. And I know for myself, I'm still in contact, for instance, with a previous supervisor that I had, and I think this is also something the employers, the organization can contribute to, even on a later stage, to continue mentoring, even though the intern is no longer employee by the organization.
Thank you. As for the interns and the ILO are concerned, the internship program is vital to the ILO and very, very well regarded. You have seen this morning we have the full support from our DG, and it's not only for today but on a regular basis. We can only count on him and just approach him to any issues we may have. Interns provide direct inputs as well to ongoing ILO projects together with the supervisor. As well, interns are contributing actively to the outputs, and therefore they are a valuable asset, as we say this morning, to the ILO. And the inputs provided by the interns are really appreciated by the whole staff. When they leave the ILO, it's hoped that they can be like ILO ambassadors and just to spread out the good words to the other employees. As far as the ILO is concerned, the ILO makes sure that interns are actively contributing to the personal and professional development of interns. What we do on a regular basis, we organize small talks with the other professionals at lunchtime, and they speak about a specific topic that could be of interest to the interns. And then it's a win-win discussion, and it's a very interactive discussion between the interns and the professionals. Once per year as well, we have this IDD, which is the International Development Day. The opening is done by the DG again, and for the whole day we try just to have a specific workshop on maybe how to write a CV, how to network effectively, how to just to meet other colleagues as well from the ILO. It's a good opportunity to know as well about other departments from the organizations. So just to mention again, it's not only good to come to the ILO, just not only for your CV, but we make sure that the interns highly contribute to the ILO mandate and values of the organizations.
Interns contribute to interns contribute to IOM by bringing their knowledge they acquire from the universities. They bring their experiences to their assigned tasks, and they are abreast with new trends on migration issues and information technology. As most interns are studying specific migration subjects, they are able to contribute their knowledge to the work of IOM. Due to their high motivation and drive, most students, while on internship, tend to work hard and try their best to impress their supervisors, thereby being able to support the organization when the need arises in a qualitative approach. In some cases, they have contributed
by helping in researches and of certain projects due to their knowledge of new developments in the field of migration. They have been an avenue for potential future entry points into the IOM. During internships, supervisors have the opportunity and ability to physically observe and identify potential future entry-level staff. In the private sector, they target, most of the organizations in the private sector target young and skillful students from universities, and they use it as a kind of entry level for managerial positions. So in this respect, IOM also uses this as an opportunity to sort of nurture and steady the interns that come into the organization in hope that they would find highly skilled staff members, highly skilled candidates who can fill in positions within the organization. Inversely, the organization in turn supports the interns as follows. IOM provides the interns the opportunity and environment to put into practice what they have studied in an organizational setting. They are able to explore their careers and through experience are able to make decisions of their career paths. IOM provides the environment to learn new skills. We contribute to their learning while boosting their confidence by nurturing, coaching, and mentoring the interns. They learn things like employee relations, team dynamics, and key organizational skills. IOM provides an environment to receive first-hand information and experience in the various facets of migration and are able to apply their educational knowledge to real-time practical situations. Interns have the opportunity to network directly with project managers at IOM due to the flattened hierarchy of the organization. So interns are able to approach managers. That we are not very hierarchical in IOM where you have to gain some kind of authorization before you see somebody. So they can walk into offices and talk to any of the managers. The intern board organizes a brown bag lunch where they invite project managers to come in to inform them about the activities that happen in their various offices. This is an opportunity where interns, even though they come in to work in their area of work, are able to learn about other operations within the organization. The experience of the experience the interns receive from IOM also boosts their CD. IOM counts the internship period of an intern as work experience in their recruitment process, an opportunity not readily available in other organizations. So when you're with IOM, the period of your internship process is counted as experience when we put out a vacancy notice. IOM has a good retention rate. Like I told you before, 10% of our staff members are retained by the organization, and most of them have grown within the organization. Thank you.
Well, for UNICEF, interns are highly valued members, and usually from experience we have found that interns come with high energy, and that positively also contributes to the dynamic of the team. And they come with innovative ideas, a fresh perspective on things that we are working on. And they, whether or not they will end up working for UNICEF after the internship ends, we find that if the internship is a positive experience for the intern, they will become advocates for UNICEF. So that is something that is very important to us as well. And of course, they bring with them up-to-date academic knowledge. We always encourage our interns to make the most of their internship experience, to fully engage with their immediate teams, but also if the opportunity is provided to also engage with other teams within the organization. They have access to our online training platforms, and we encourage interns to network, and we find that this could provide them with an edge when competing for positions after the internship, whether they are competing for positions at UNICEF, UN, or even within the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few more words for me, because again, I can only second my colleagues who've already spoken. Of course, for WIPO as well, interns are an extremely valuable resource of recent up-to-date knowledge of a particular subject matter learned at university. WIPO has a very low turnover, so a lot of colleagues that work at WIPO have been there for a long, long time. Sometimes when an intern then joins such a team, it's a bit of a shock to the system that there are people out there who've not been working with us for such a long time, so it rejuvenates and invigorates those teams as well if there's somebody who comes with a high level of motivation and commitment and energy. And of course, we in turn as an organization bank on the fact that if we treat our interns well, they become ambassadors for the organization, they tell others about WIPO, whether it's then prompting others to apply for internships or positions with us. So that's very important. I already mentioned that interns are unlikely to end up with us in a position or a post straight after their internship because of the limited numbers of internships that we have, and posts, of course, that don't come out every day either. But what we're trying to do is to teach skills that are also applicable in other environments, and very much the same as my colleagues. This concerns networking skills, to sharpen research skills, analysis, teamwork. When I finished my degree, which is by now about 10, 11 years ago, I thought I knew it all. I had a good background and I had a profession, and I completely underestimated how important it is to then try out these skills in a team environment, because that's in the end what it's all about. So I think this is a truly important point also to advance internship programs, to give people that opportunity to try out what you've learned at university in a structured work context. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. We will now open the floor to some questions you might have for representatives.
Thank you very much. I think that was very interesting. Appreciate the diversity of different internship arrangements and learn a bit from other organizations. To what I would be very interested in, you said interns have the opportunity in various of your organizations to apply for posts after they finish their internship. And I think one thing that is important to notice is that for many of these official positions, they are often advertised at the P2 level, for which you need 18 to 24 months of work experience. So one topic of debate I know in the past, and I think what I'm interested to hear from you, is to what extent does an internship, especially if it's a paid internship, contribute as work experience when these people apply? Or does it essentially mean if you're a graduate student and you do a 6-month or even a 12-month internship at one of your organizations, that then you need to go and work 2 years elsewhere before you come back, because this in fact is not counted as experience at all?
Thank you.
Within IOM, yes, there are P2 and higher level positions, but there are also something we call ungraded. They're there for short-term assignments, and it's an all-inclusive salary. It's not a consultancy, which is more of a looking for an expert in a certain area, but it's a short-term assignment for a specific task or for specific responsibility for a short period of time. So the requirements are not the requirements for a P2 level. And as my colleague mentioned, I forgot what I was going to say. As my colleague mentioned, the experience counts, the internship experience counts 100% toward the experience of any job requirement.
Yeah, at the ILO does not set any mandatory break between after the internship program compared to my colleagues at WIPO. So we just consider that the internship program is not considered to be like an employment scheme. It's really like a learning experience. We don't count the internship program as a working experience, but as a learning. But what we try to do after the internship program, we know that most of you are trying to look for a temporary position. Some of them can, some of them do not succeed for any reasons. And so we just really encourage interns to leave the organizations after the internship program, maybe to discover the world, to go to another UN agencies, maybe why not working for NGOs in the field, to learn a new language, and then to come back. And when they come back, then they will have gained experience, and they could be as well more competitive for a P2 or P3 position at the time they apply. But if we had the case if a few months are missing when they do apply for a P2 position, and you have done an internship at the ILO, we might consider just a few months just to compensate.
Thank you very much. So basically at WIPO, we consider internships as work experience as long as they were of a certain duration. So we wouldn't necessarily count a 6-week internship, but we start looking at counting it when it's 3-4 months at minimum, because then we think people have been involved in meaningful work with a deliverable and an output towards the end of it. We generally look at the relevance of the work, so whether it's paid or non-paid doesn't make a difference to us. But it needs to be relevant to the job that one is applying to. WIPO in the past few years has started publishing more junior entry-level vacancies, so we do publish P1s, for which you need either a year of experience, preferably, but sometimes we don't set a minimum there so people can apply, but again, some experience is desirable in this particular area. For P2, like many of my colleagues, we have certain minimum requirements that we apply, but we do count internships as experience as long as the experience was of a certain duration and relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these presentations. I actually had 2 questions. My first question, because from what I understand, internships is all about knowledge. So maybe from an HR perspective, I want to know how is there not a need of actually defining what we mean by knowledge, and how do we really monitor this knowledge acquired by interns? Because if you look at experiences here at the ILO, I think it's clear that the experiences are very different depending on the supervisor, but also it's clear that we're not staff. This is why we're not getting the proper money, and this is why we have to learn something. But then if we end up spending a lot of time on administrative work, or what is knowledge in that sense? And then the second question would be related to also when you are screening for applicants, do you have all organizations here, do you have requirements as in, okay, this person has had 5 internships with the same knowledge, what is the extra knowledge that they might get from this organization? Because I myself, I've been in other UN organizations and I've been shifting around in internships, and now I'm questioning, does it really make sense or not? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I think what is important on our side, I can speak on behalf of Peer Info. What we do when we are looking for an internship, we have clear term of references, and so when people apply, we're looking for specific skills, so they know with whom they are going to work within the team, and so it's clear. I think it's very important that we spoke before about a meaningful internship and relevance of the task. I think it's really important that organizations have clear term of reference, and they know who they hire. Like this, who the organization and the person who is making the internship are benefiting from the internship. And of course, during the course of the internship, the interns have the possibility to develop their skills. And I think it's also an issue of dialogue and getting to know, for example, I've asked, for example, some of the interns what they would like, in fact, to develop during their internship, if they would like to write an article on specific knowledge that they have gained during the university, and that can help them in finding a job later on. So I think it's really an issue of ensuring that there's a good supervision, that the person is hired, respond to the need of the organization and can develop the skill.
Okay, at IOM, the minimum length of an internship assignment is 2 months and the maximum is 9 months. When interns want to extend their internship beyond 9 months, we encourage them to look in other organizations. But the exception to this is if you're going to have an internship in another department altogether, you are allowed to have an internship in another department because you're going to learn something different. The advice I would give to interns is don't keep doing internships just to get yourself engaged in a particular organization. You need to develop yourself. You need to look out there. I give you an example of an intern came to me requesting to have another internship. And what I said to the intern was, do you want your CV to be reading internships throughout? No. Try and explore other opportunities. Try to, whilst you are within the organization, to network, speak to other project managers in the field offices out there to see whether you have an opportunity in the field office. Rather than moving from one internship to another, like Diane said, we have ungraded positions that come up in field offices because projects keep coming up. In advising some of the interns, I've had so many interns get short-term ungraded contracts in the field offices. So instead of moving from one internship to another, it will be more, it gets to a point you should try to look for jobs because if you keep doing internships, it will not be so good on your CV. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid our time is elapsing. However, as we mentioned, our event is being broadcasted online for those who couldn't be here, who are not in Geneva. And we have many questions from those people. Maybe one question from them for you is, how do you and agencies intend to address issues on diversity, especially geographic representation and disability, when recruiting interns?
Within IOM, we really encourage, the data speaks, the research speaks, and we really try to encourage our managers to look at diversity when recruiting, and many of them do, actually. I'm proud to say that in our department we have an intern from a diverse background and who's doing a fantastic job. The other aspect is that recently, in the last 2 years, the Director General has allocated some additional funding to support interns from geographical diversity, to support geographical diversity. And where a department doesn't have funding to support an intern, if a student comes from a diverse background, we would use this additional funding in order to support the subsistence allowance. So that's how IOM tackles it. I still think that we have a long way to go, but at least we're starting to address the issue.
At UNICEF, we are hoping that with the introduction of the new guidelines surrounding inclusiveness and transparency, we will be able to partially address increasing diversity within internships. We think that by being able to pay interns, it will make it more feasible for certain interns to be able to use up this opportunity, and as well as making the vacancy announcement for internship as wide as possible, that it will attract a lot of interns from various backgrounds to apply to the internships. So we're hoping that with these two initiatives, we will see better representation in UNICEF in terms of interns. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that. I think this is the end of our event. Thank you all very much, and we hope that you were able to gain an insight both in the internship and youth employment panorama, but also of some best practices, examples that you presented to us today. We thank you, all the participants, for being with us today, those that are following us through the podcast.
and the speakers, of course, and a special thank you to Laura, Irene, Mateo, Wilco, Emmeline, the ILO colleagues who brought this event here today in the ILO. Thank you very much. So please remember that you exit the building from door 5, and also we are providing certificates of attendance right outside the room, and we are offering some Pay Your Interns back, the ones that Laura is showing. Thank you all very much for being here.